Dark Lord Sauron forged the One Ring in the fiery chasms of Mount Doom, and JRR Tolkien created the dangerous but mesmerising Middle-earth in his Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit books. This vision was translated into 2 trilogies by filmmaker Peter Jackson, starting with the Lord of the Rings movies, and then the 3 Hobbit films set 60 years in the past. This sinister world of Tolkien and Jackson are riddled with dark sorcerers, powerful wizards, murderous orcs, selfish elves, monstrous abominations, deadly creatures far beyond the human grasp. But it's these evil forces that elevate the protagonists into heroes, keep the narrative nail-bitingly interesting. So join us on this quest as we explore the dark side of Middle-earth and introduce the crazy villains of the franchise to you. And we'd like to start the list with the Lord of the Rings Trilogy. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Sauron. We have to begin with Sauron. Come on, because there is only one Lord of the Ring. Only one who can bend it to his will, and he doesn't share power. This Dark Lord Sauron, the overarching antagonist of the series, is the whole reason that Frodo Baggins and the Fellowship embark on their dangerous quest to destroy the One Ring, creating a storyline which spans across 3 Lord of the Rings movies. Once the servant of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord of Middle-earth, Sauron created the One Ring with the power to control and enslave all of Middle-earth, which he almost did, killing men and elves and even the King of Gondor, Elendil. The king's son, Isildur, cut off Sauron's fingers with his father's sword, destroying Sauron's body as the ring was forged with a part of Sauron's soul, tying their fates together forever. But Isildur retained the One Ring, and Sauron lived on as a spirit who can only be destroyed if the ring is thrown into the flames of Mount Doom, where it was forged. Thousands of years later, when the lost One Ring resurfaced again, the spirit of Sauron returned to Mordor in the form of a flaming, disembodied, lidless eye that sees all and knows all. Sauron gathered an army of orcs, the Nazgul, and other evil creatures to wage the War of the Ring to torment and rule the free folks of Middle-earth and obliterate mankind, while also waiting to be reunited with the ring to regain his physical form. Sauron's physical form briefly appears in the movie as a devilish humanoid with black, spiked armor. In the Hobbit prequel trilogy, he appears as the Necromancer, and we'll tell you more on that later. Saruman. Meet the secondary antagonist of the LOTR movies, Wizard Saruman the Wise, the bestie-turned-foe of the wizard Gandalf, famously played by late actor Christopher Lee. As the head of the White Council, a gathering of the wise, Saruman arrived in Middle-earth to prevent the re-emergence of Sauron, but blinded by envy for Gandalf and greed, Saruman got lured into Sauron's service, eventually turning into his puppet. Saruman secretly harbored the dream of cheating his master and becoming the Lord of the Rings himself, and sends an elite force to procure the ring from the Fellowship for himself. But under Sauron's command in Orthanc in Isengard, this evil wizard summons the orcs from the Misty Mountains and creates a massive army of the grotesque beasts, the Uruk-hai, to help defeat Gandalf's forces in the War of the Ring. When Saruman reveals his true allegiance to Sauron and that he's betrayed the White Council, he's reprimanded by Gandalf, resulting in an epic battle of the wizards, which however ends with Gandalf getting trapped in the Tower of Orthanc. As a white wizard, which is the most powerful kind of wizards on Middle-earth, Saruman was extremely powerful and stronger than his contemporaries, even Gandalf. There's an interesting theory behind Saruman's appearance as the powerful sorcerer apprentice of Sauron, one that's confirmed by the director himself, that Saruman made up for the absence of Sauron's physical form in the movies. The Witch King of Angmar. You're about to meet the deadly Nazgul soon. Before that, meet their boss, Angmar. This unbodied, cursed and corrupted king is the second in command of Sauron, the leader of the remaining 8 Nazgul, and the ruler of the kingdom of Angmar. He turned into an undead being, a wraith, when he accepted one of the 9 rings of power created for men by Sauron. After the Dark Lord was killed but not destroyed by Isildur, this Witch King of Angmar went into hiding along with the other Nazgul. During the events of the trilogy, the Witch King and his army reappear as ghostly dark horse riders who chase Frodo Baggins and his friends in the hunt for the One Ring. As an extension of Sauron himself, as the Nazgul are all connected through the Rings of Power, the Witch King despised the race of men. He was extremely powerful, only second to Sauron, and had a bunch of wicked powers, such as black breath that would give one nightmarish hallucinations, and the ability of lightning conjuration. Riding the winged fell beasts, the Witch King puts on his deathly armor, wages war against Gondor, and even kills King Theoden of Rohan, but is slain by Theoden's niece Eowyn, who stabs him in the face and disintegrates this Nazgul king in the Pelennor fields. The Witch King was such a deadly sorcerer that he was the only member of Sauron's army that truly freaked out Gandalf.
Gollum, my precious.
These words are enough to hint at our next antagonist of the LOTR movies, none other than Gollum, or should we say,
Schmeagol.
Undoubtedly one of the most intriguing characters. Schmeagol was a store hobbit who chanced upon the ring on his 33rd birthday when he killed his cousin to claim the ring as his birthday present, naming it as his.
Precious.
Schmeagol goes on to antagonize and loot his family members with the power of the ring, and eventually gets ostracized when he seeks shelter in the Misty Mountains. By this time, the malignant influence of the ring has corrupted Schmeagol's mind and body, turning him into a grotesque creature called Gollum, a nickname he received because of the repulsive noise he made from his throat. In time, this creature developed a split personality, Gollum being the dark side that's willing to murder whoever tried to take the ring from him, and Schmeagol still remembering traces of friendship and kindness. The ring extended Gollum's life beyond the usual, and Gollum lived in the Misty Mountains for over 500 years when Frodo's uncle, Bilbo Baggins, retrieved the ring. Gollum had lost it in the caves. Years later, when Frodo chanced upon Gollum again in the LOTR storyline, Gollum deceitfully agreed to take him to Mount Doom, secretly plotting to kill Frodo and reunite with his precious again. When the time came, Gollum cut off Frodo's fingers and the ring with it, but accidentally fell into the chasm of Mount Doom's lava, destroying both the ring and himself. Despite being a major antagonist, Gollum's survival till the end was crucial, as he plays the ultimate role in the trilogy's final moments and saves Middle-earth from Sauron's torment once and for all. Famously played by Andy Serkis, Gollum's distorted voice was inspired by the actor's pet cat. Gríma Wormtongue. This creepy fellow is a master of brainwashing who corrupted the mind of Theoden, the king of Rohan. Wormtongue, a citizen of Rohan and the chief advisor to the king, betrayed the kingdom by secretly operating for Saruman. The White Wizard promised Wormtongue the hand of Theoden's niece Éowyn in exchange for his services. As a result, Wormtongue rendered the king almost incapacitated with his psychological manipulation, sat in the king's chamber and took decisions for the kingdom of Rohan that were beneficial for Saruman's grand plan. When Theoden's nephew Éomer resisted Wormtongue's ways, he banished the young prince and lusted after Éowyn. When Gandalf arrived in Rohan's court, he disrupted Wormtongue's influence over Theoden, prompting the king to try and kill this sneaky little traitor. Wormtongue then joined Saruman in Isengard and was mistreated so severely that he wished Saruman was dead. Wormtongue stabbed the White Wizard just when he was about to reveal Sauron's next plan of action to the Fellowship. Saruman fell from the tower and got impaled on spikes, while Wormtongue was shot with an arrow by elf warrior Legolas. In the book, Wormtongue was implied to be a cannibal, having supposedly murdered and eaten Frodo's cousin, Lotho. Shelob. She's an evil entity in spider form, one of the oldest creatures of the LOTR franchise, who existed long before Sauron's rise to power, which makes her several thousand years old. The last offspring of the ancient malevolent entity known as the Ungoliant, Shelob is a monstrous, bloodthirsty spider that haunts the pass of Cirith Ungol, located above the Winding Stair and at the border of Mordor. Gollum misguided Frodo and Sam into Shelob's lair, in the hopes that after Shelob kills the hobbits, Gollum would be reunited with the One Ring again. Shelob is an omniscient shapeshifter and a master of stealth, attacking her opponents with fangs, claws, pincers, and a deadly poison-coated stinger. Shelob's venom paralyzes the victim instantly, in this case Frodo, who froths at the mouth and loses consciousness. He's then wrapped up in Shelob's web so that she can feed on his fresh meat whenever she pleases. The books describe Shelob as a beast that spends her days in the lair, drinking the blood of elves and men, getting bloated and grown fat with endless brooding on her feasts. Having lived long enough in her dark cave, Shelob repulses light, thus Sam was able to distract her with the shining star glass. As one can guess, this beastly creature is extremely hard to kill, but Sam was able to pierce through her stinking flesh with a sword. While it didn't fatally wound Shelob, she was forced to retreat into her lair. Beyond the fight with Shelob was another challenge. The exit was blocked with Shelob's powerful webbing and could only be cut through with Frodo's elven sword. Sauron's Orc Commander. Gothmog the Orc was the second in command of the Witch King of Angmar, and the ruthless ground leader of Sauron's forces unleashed on Gondor and its capital, Minas Tirith. Gothmog was instructed to destroy Minas Tirith and its occupants, except for Gandalf, who Angmar wanted to deal with himself. During the War of the Ring, after Saruman is defeated, Angmar attacks Gondor, when Gothmog leads the Orc army from the river into the city of Osgiliath and crushes the Gondor army and brutally kills the Gondor knight Madril, declaring it's time that orcs rule over mankind. Gothmog was a heinous, sadist commander who launched the decapitated heads of slain Gondor soldiers into battle to instill fear among the forces. After the Orc armies violently clash with the Rohirrim warriors, Gothmog manages to survive the onslaught but is injured by Éowyn moments before she kills the Witch King Angmar. Just when Gothmog prepares to finish off Éowyn with a mace, Gimli impales his torso, Aragorn chops off Gothmog's arm and delivers a finishing blow to his back. The Mouth of Sauron. Sauron's most unscrupulous servant was the Mouth of Sauron, who was a vessel for Sauron's messages and served as the lieutenant of the fortress of Barad-dûr. He belonged to the Black Númenóreans, who worshipped Morgoth and practiced dark magic during his realm. When Gandalf and the Fellowship arrive at the Black Gate, which is the impenetrable gate across Cirith Gorgor and an entrance to Sauron's realm of Mordor, the Mouth of Sauron rides out on his horse and mockingly greets the team. When Gandalf demands that Sauron disband the armies of Mordor, the Mouth of Sauron laughs menacingly and throws Frodo's mithril shirt at Gandalf, trying to break their will by suggesting that Frodo was tortured and killed by Sauron's forces deep inside Cirith Gorgor, unaware that Frodo managed to escape. He then mocks Aragorn, saying it takes more than Isildur's sword to become a king, when the heir of Gondor decapitates this evil lieutenant and marches inside the Black Gate. In fan theories, it is said that this sinister being got a cracked mouth and grotesque appearance just from repeating Sauron's words. Balrog, a demon of the ancient world. This foe is beyond any of you. Gandalf's words perfectly describe this horned, fiery demon, an iconic antagonist of the LOTR movies. Dorin's Bane, the Balrog, appears within the deep, dark chasms of Moria when the Fellowship were passing through the Dwarven Kingdom, crossing the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Long back, Dorin's Bane served Morgoth's armies in the Great War of Wrath, and after the Dark Lord's defeat, the Balrog retreated to the darkness of Khazad-dûm. This gigantic demon was accidentally awakened when the dwarves ventured deep into Moria, looking for mithril, following which Dorin's Bane presumably killed or drove the dwarves away. In the underground realm of Moria, Gandalf immediately recognized this monster when he saw Dorin's Bane emerging from the shadows and yelled out, "Run!" to the Fellowship. When they make it to the bridge of Khazad-dûm, Gandalf stays back to fight this fiery monster, because only he could defeat this ancient beast with his powerful magic. The Balrog's weapons are elemental in nature, such as a sword and a whip composed of flame, just like its own burning form. This results in an iconic battle of magic, which ends with Gandalf destroying the demon's sword using an enchanted barrier, and the Balrog falling into the chasms, but also dragging Gandalf along with its fiery whip. Denethor II. This unstable, cruel, cowardly ruler of Gondor was driven to insanity after his son Boromir was killed by the Uruk-hai Lurtz while serving the Fellowship. Denethor belonged from the long line of stewards who served the kings of Gondor. In the absence of the rightful heir to the king became its rulers. Denethor became paranoid that his lineage would end with him, and that Gondor was left with no allies to defend itself against Sauron's many forces. But when Sauron's armies marched toward Gondor, Denethor refused to seek help from the kingdom of Rohan, because he knew that the rightful heir of Gondor, Aragorn, would be riding with Rohan's army. Instead of defending the capital Minas Tirith, he sent his son Faramir to the city of Osgiliath, who returned defeated and severely injured. In his frustration, Denethor then attempted to burn himself and Faramir and jumped to his death, while Faramir was saved by Gandalf. Denethor is a supporting antagonist whose actions were not evil, but misguided. The Haradrim and Mumakil. The Haradrim are a race of savage men from the scorched deserts of the southern parts of Middle-earth who were formidable warriors and turned fanatically loyal to Sauron under his corrupt influence. The Haradrim don spiked ceremonial frames, cover their faces, and fought by throwing spears, scimitars, pikes, and bows. They rode horses but also commanded the battle beasts Mumakil, which are elephant-like creatures with gigantic tusks and extreme durability from the jungles of Harad. The Mumakil were trained battle beasts who were commanded by a Haradrim chieftain with a special connection to the creature. Sauron deceitfully lured these warriors into joining his war with the promise of rich, fertile lands of Gondor. During the War of the Ring, armies of Haradrim passed through Ithilien, riding the Mumakil inside towers attached to the beasts' backs. Summoned by Sauron, the Haradrim arrived to lay their siege in Gondor and were unleashed during the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Some Mumakil were killed in the battle, but the Haradrim almost won the war for Sauron until Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas arrived with the army of the dead and defeated Sauron's forces. The Ring Wraiths. Remember the Nazgûl, aka the Ring Wraiths or the Black Riders? These terrifying undead beings were once 9 noble men who were lured by Sauron into accepting the Rings of Power, which granted them a ghostly immortality, made them masters of dark magic, and tied them to Sauron's will forever. The Nazgûl and their lord Angmar are the deadliest of Sauron's servants, who were tasked with seeking the One Ring back from Frodo and destroying the Fellowship. The Nazgûl arrived at the Shire looking for Frodo and then tracked him down multiple times, with Frodo escaping their attacks each time. During one such ambush, Aragorn drove them away using his flaming sword, and later Arwen crushed the Nazgûl by summoning a flood. The Nazgûl returned on the winged fell beasts to aid Sauron in the War of the Ring, but before they could reach Mount Doom, Gollum fell into the chasm with the ring, destroying Sauron and the Black Riders forever. These horse-riding, hooded dark entities were extremely difficult to slay as they wielded Morgul blades and cast dark magic. Their presence generated a sense of doom and terror in men, paralyzing them with fear, which is the Nazgûl's greatest weapon. Their black breath could also incapacitate anyone unfortunate enough to be in their vicinity. The Corsairs of Umbar. This crew of pirates briefly appear in the extended version of the Return of the King movie and are only mentioned in the theatrical cut. The Corsairs of Umbar are descendants of the once proud navy of Gondor, who have been corrupted over time and are feared by the people of Gondor. They're an ally of Sauron and serve him in the Battle of the Ring by attempting to attack Minas Tirith from the south by sailing in their black ships. And in exchange, they're promised a hefty portion of the exploits. However, the ruler of Rivendell, Elrond, warns Aragorn of the Corsairs, saying that they secretly sail toward Gondor upon Sauron's command, and in 2 days, they'll outrun Aragorn's army. Following the warning, Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn confront the Corsairs with the army of the dead, and seemingly finish them off. Using the pirate ships, Aragorn and his allies then destroy the armies of Sauron. Lurtz. Remember the freakish Uruk-hai creatures we mentioned earlier? This twisted cocktail of orcs, humans, and goblins were created by Saruman to replace the orcs as a new breed of powerful warriors and man-eating foot soldiers in the War of the Ring. Lurtz is their monstrous leader, and the first ever Uruk-hai created by Saruman. Emerging from his birthing sac, Lurtz's first action was to kill the pitmaster who supervised his rising process. Lurtz was fiercely loyal to Saruman and was tasked with retrieving the ring-bearing hobbits back to his master. However, this bloodthirsty monster was disheartened to learn that he had to keep the hobbits alive and breathing. Being an Uruk-hai, Lurtz didn't feel pain, was a deadly combatant, possessed extraordinary strength, and was a lethal weapon wielder. Lurtz brutally killed Fellowship warrior Boromir and tried to chomp on Aragorn with his bare teeth, but was decapitated by the heir of Isildur after a nail-biting fight sequence. Lurtz's attack on the Fellowship significantly impacted the future events, such that the Fellowship split up and pursued their missions separately, and Boromir's father, grieving the death of his son, abandoned the defenses of Minas Tirith. Uglúk. In the Lord of the Rings novel, this ill-tempered, bloodthirsty Uruk-hai was the commander of the beastly orcs. He was the one who murdered Boromir. However, in the movies, he served Lurtz as his second-in-command, a lieutenant of the Uruk-hai army. Following the death of Lurtz, Uglúk takes over as the commander of the Uruk-hai. And just like his predecessor, Uglúk is dedicated to serving his master, Saruman the Wise. He's vicious and arrogant, one who despises the orcs and looks down upon his fellow Uruk-hai. He even cannibalizes on the orcs he killed along with his Uruk-hai army, while delivering the spine-chilling dialogue,
"Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys."
After the clash with the Fellowship members and Lurtz's beheading, Uglúk manages to capture the hobbits Merry and Pippin, mistaking them for Frodo and Samwise, but while passing through Rohan, Uglúk and his army are intercepted by the riders of Rohan, led by Éomer, who slaughters every single one of them. Gorbag and Shagrat. Gorbag is an orc lieutenant who loves to torture prisoners, while Shagrat is an Uruk-hai leader who wants to procure Frodo's prized belongings for himself. Both these orc baddies serve Sauron and are stationed at Cirith Ungol, a passage located near Minas Morgul in Mordor. Despite being loyal to Sauron, Gorbag and Shagrat's orc armies treat each other as rivals, which culminates into a violent clash in the Return of the King movie. Soon after, Frodo is captured and his possessions are retrieved, while Gorbag suggests that Frodo's belongings, particularly the mithril shirt, are handed over to the Eye of Sauron. Shagrat succumbs to his greed and demands the mithril shirt for himself. Shagrat attacks the orc lieutenant, sparking a chaotic fight between the Uruk-hai and the orcs where both teams destroy each other. While Shagrat's fate remains unknown, Gorbag pursues Frodo only to get stabbed by Samwell. P.S. It's Gorbag who explains the effects of Shelob's venom to Samwell in the movie. The Cave Troll. Beware of cave trolls if you're walking through the mines of Dwarf Kingdom Moria, located under the Misty Mountains. These mountains are home to gigantic, violent cave trolls. When the Fellowship crew and the vicious orcs were fighting during the Battle of the Bridge of Khazad-dûm inside Balin's tomb in Moria, one such humongous cave troll, belonging to the orc army, smashes into the tomb chamber. Snarling and growling at the Fellowship, it attacks the Fellowship with its spiked flail, attached at the end of a chain, while not incurring any damage from the counterattacks. It easily overpowers every warrior in the Fellowship. The cave troll then tracks down Frodo and manages to stab him with a forked spear, but thanks to the mithril shirt, Frodo survives. When Legolas shoots an arrow through the mouth of the troll, piercing its skull and killing it. The book describes these trolls as servants of Sauron, who thrive in dark caverns and are found in several locations across Middle-earth. Now, we'd like to wind up this scary, demonic menagerie of villains from the Lord of the Rings movies and focus on the Middle-earth baddies that appeared in the prequel, The Hobbit Trilogy, the Hobbit Trilogy, the events of which take place 6 decades earlier. And what better way to begin than by introducing the overarching antagonist of the storyline, Smaug.
I am fire. I am death.
Other words that sum up the menacing, growling dragon, played by Benedict Cumberbatch in a motion-action suit. Smaug was a fire drake, believed to be the largest dragon of Middle-earth, with an insatiable thirst for well. Smaug is a sadistic and greedy dragon with teeth like swords, claws like spears, wings like hurricane, and a deathly fire breath. Interestingly, Smaug was designed with 6 fingers so that he could animate with his webbed hands as well. Smaug infiltrated the Lonely Mountains, drove out the dwarf inhabitants, and claimed all the dwarf gold as his own. Smaug is the reason that the storyline of the Hobbit trilogy kickstarts, with Frodo's uncle Bilbo Baggins joining Gandalf and 13 dwarfs, led by Thorin Oakenshield on their quest to reclaim the dwarven kingdom of Erebor from Smaug. Bilbo accidentally awakens the dragon while retrieving the Arkenstone and uses the One Ring to become invisible. Smaug eventually discovers Bilbo and the dwarfs and tries to kill them, but Thorin causes Smaug's dragonfire to melt a gigantic gold statue and drown the dragon in the molten gold river. Howling in anger and crying in pain, Smaug flies toward Lake Town Esgaroth, determined to burn the people down as they help the dwarves in their plan to reach Erebor. Bard the bowman notices Smaug's vulnerable spot and shoots the last black arrow through Smaug's heart when the light leaves his eyes and Smaug crashes down in the lake below. Later, it was also discovered that Smaug had been an ally of Sauron. Azog the Defiler. This orc's name speaks volumes about its bloodthirsty nature. Azog is the second most crucial antagonist of the Hobbit franchise after Smaug, and is a visually terrifying villain with symmetrical scars on his pale-skinned face and a prosthetic arm. Long ago, Azog the Defiler took over the dwarven town of Moria, killed King Thror, and drove his son Thrain insane from grief and a desire for revenge. Thrain's son Thorin managed to slice off Azog's left arm and left him brutally wounded, believed to be dead for 60 years. But Azog returned as the servant of Sauron, became the commander of the Orcs of Dol Guldur. His hatred runs deep, especially toward the Oakenshield bloodline, especially Thorin Oakenshield and his dwarf companions, as he relentlessly hunts Thorin throughout the storyline. In the first film, Azog orders his minions, the Wolf Wargs, to chomp on the dwarves, except for Thorin, who he saves for himself. But thanks to the Great Eagles and Bilbo, Thorin and the dwarves survive this assault. But so does Azog, who continues his pursuit of Thorin all the way to the Lonely Mountains. In the third film, Azog and Thorin engage in an epic combat sequence on a frozen lake, which ends with Azog impaling Thorin and Thorin stabbing Azog through the heart and pinning him to the frozen floor. Though Thorin dies later from Azog's wounds, he managed to avenge the death of both his grandfather and his fellow dwarf Fili. Azog is undoubtedly the most psychopathic and fearsome of the entire orc race, one that only served Sauron as he promised him Thorin's head in return. Bolg. Azog was succeeded by his spawn, another orc named Bolg, who aided his father in his mission to take down Thorin Oakenshield and his kindred from the very beginning. Bolg is the arch-enemy of Legolas, and engages him in a brutal battle in the second film, but fails to kill him. Following his failure, Azog sends Bolg to guard Mount Gundabad in the north, and Bolg later marches the Gundabad army of orcs into the final battle. Bolg and Legolas cross paths again at the Battle of the Five Armies, which is when the final showdown between Thorin and Azog takes place in the third film. During the intense battle, Legolas has to give up his sword to save Thorin, but keeps fighting Bolg with his dagger. He eventually jumps on Bolg's shoulders, pierces his skull, twists the dagger in his head, scrambling Bolg's brains and killing the orc just minutes before Thorin kills his father, Azog. Just like his dad, Bolg too was a sadistic brute with a grotesque appearance, as a metal strip was half integrated into his face. The Necromancer, Sauron. Any guesses for who the Necromancer is? It's none other than Sauron the Dark Lord himself. We previously mentioned that after Isildur chopped off his fingers and procured the ring, Sauron survived in spirit form and fled to Dol Guldur, the Hill of Dark Sorcery, where he set up his secret base of operations, posing as a sorcerer named the Necromancer. 500 years after Sauron's disappearance, Gandalf suspects the Dark Lord has returned again as the Necromancer, and the White Council sends him to Dol Guldur to discover the true identity of the sorcerer. With his dark magic, the Necromancer proves to be far more powerful than Gandalf, knocking the wizard out and destroying his magic staff. Revealing himself as Sauron, the Necromancer taunts Gandalf for failing to kill him, and says that he's preparing for a war to enslave and rule all of Middle-earth, just like he'd hoped before. Gandalf is imprisoned under the watchful eye of the Necromancer's torturer, but is rescued by the White Council as the Necromancer unleashes the Nazgul upon them. The Necromancer then takes the form of Sauron's lidless eye, and prophesies the rise of the witch realm of Angmar, before Lady Galadriel banishes Sauron from Dol Guldur by exhausting her powers. The Hobbit trilogy ends with Sauron's forces eventually being defeated by the alliance of men, elves, dwarves, and the Great Eagles in the Battle of the Five Armies. As the Necromancer, Sauron appeared in the form of a dark, shadowy figure, unable to attain a physical body without the ring. Even in his shadowy form, Sauron was unbelievably powerful, proving to be stronger than even Gandalf and the White Council put together. Thranduil. There are outright evil characters in the Hobbit trilogy, like the Necromancer and Azog the Defiler, and then there are also unreasonable and cold characters like Thranduil, who is selfish and cruel towards those who need help. Thranduil is the Elven King of Mirkwood and the father of Legolas, who seems far more cynical and bitter than others of his kind. When Thorin and his dwarves were fleeing Lonely Mountain, following the attack by Smaug, the dwarves sought help from Thranduil, but he refused them shelter or aid so as not to endanger the lives of his elves. It is discovered that Thorin's grandfather Thror had stolen Thranduil's gemstones, which explains his dislike for the dwarves. While the Battle of the Five Armies was brewing, Thranduil prepared to wage a war of his own on the dwarves and attack the Lonely Mountains to retrieve a jewel necklace in Thorin's possession, which was actually a remembrance of his late wife. However, Thranduil's plans were disrupted when Azog the Defiler showed up with his orc army, and Gandalf convinced Thranduil to fight the orcs with his elves. Thranduil was enraged by how much elven blood was shed to shield the dwarves, was also on the verge of killing the elven captain Tauriel for fighting on behalf of the dwarves, when Legolas intervened and protected Tauriel as a human shield. Following the Battle of the Five Armies, Thranduil repented his mistakes, confessing that his grief over his late wife and his obsession with the gemstones had made him vindictive and hostile. Orcs and Wargs. The Orcs are the most instrumental baddies of the entire Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings movies, carrying out the will of Sauron in both storylines. These are a murderous species of warriors, terrifyingly grotesque appearances, and an unquenchable thirst for blood. It's said that the first Dark Lord Morgoth kidnapped and tortured elves, and performed freak experiments on them to create this hostile species filled with eternal rage. In the Hobbit films, Azog and his son Bolg are the main orc antagonists, who have pale skin and a muscular appearance like humans, and want to wipe out Middle-earth of elves, dwarves, and men to establish an orc empire under Sauron. A new kind of orcs also appeared in the movies, such as the Great Goblin, covered in pinkish warts and lumps. The warrior orcs are also excellent warg riders, which are a monstrous breed of wolves who served Sauron's forces during the Third Age. In the Hobbit films, wargs are bred by the orcs of Mount Gundabad, and these Gundabad wargs are the fastest of their kind. Azog the Defiler rode a huge white female warg to personally hunt down Thorin Oakenshield in the Misty Mountains. The orc armies paired with the warg beasts posed double the threat for the free folks of Middle-earth. The wargs wouldn't even hesitate to feast on the orcs, as Azog fed his failed lieutenant Yazneg to a horde of hungry wargs. In the Lord of the Rings films, the wargs are bred by the orcs of Isengard and Mordor. The Great Goblin. Here we have the king of Goblin Town, the Great Goblin, who lives inside the misty mountains of Middle-earth. The Great Goblin was a grotesque, bloated orc leader with his body covered in lumps, scars, and warts, and a menacing set of large eyes. He carries a staff adorned with shrunken heads and a skull, and wears a crown made of bones on its deformed head. When Thorin and his entourage landed in Goblin Town through a trapdoor, this wealth-obsessed orc leader wanted to kill Thorin for Azog the Defiler, collect a pretty price for his unattached head. Even while plotting Thorin's death, Goblin King taunts the dwarf as a nobody for not having reclaimed the Lonely Mountains yet. With the dwarves trapped in his town, the Great Goblin sadistically hummed a tune about torturing Thorin and his team before he ordered his orc minions to slaughter the dwarves. But Gandalf arrived just in time to scatter the orcs away and then yelled at the dwarves to run for their lives. Despite his big plans, the Goblin King dies a brutal death when Gandalf pierces his eye with his staff and then slits his abdomen and slices his neck. The encounter with the Great Goblin is crucial for the Lords of the Rings storyline, because during the scuffle, Bilbo fell through the tunnels into Gollum's lair and chanced upon the One Ring. Tom, Bert, and William. These were the three notorious trolls that Bilbo, Thorin, and their entourage met inside Trollshaws while making their way to the Lonely Mountains. These vagabond trolls survived by robbing and killing wayfarers, but steered clear of sunlight as it turns them into stone. The trolls steal a bunch of dwarf ponies, and when Bilbo tries to retrieve them secretly, he accidentally alerts Tom, Bert, and William about his presence. The trolls kidnap Bilbo and the dwarves and put them in sacks, planning to cook and eat them later. This is when Bilbo spots Gandalf lurking around in the area and realizes he'll get them out of the troll menace. In a bid to buy more time, Bilbo starts yapping about ways to cook dwarves, and even says that dwarves have intestinal parasites. But William is the most intelligent of the lot and sees through Bilbo's false words when Gandalf arrives and breaks a rock with magic that's been shielding the trolls from sunlight. Tom, Bert, and William are instantly turned to stone by the rising sun. 6 decades later, the petrified stone statues of Tom, Bert, and William remain exactly at the same location, and are encountered by Aragorn, Frodo, and his Hobbit friends when they pass through Trollshaws on their way to Mirkwood. The Spiders of Mirkwood. We talked about the monstrous spider Shelob before. Now it's time to meet her offspring, the enormous lethal spiders that haunt Mirkwood, the greatest forest in all of Middle-earth. The flesh-eating, snarling spiders, also known as the spawn of Ungoliant, are implied to have emerged from Dol Guldur, which is the hill of dark sorcery and the secret hideout of the necromancer. When darkness starts returning to Middle-earth around Sauron's re-emergence, the evil spiders crawl out of Dol Guldur and infest the Mirkwood forests. They spread their malevolent influence, enchanting the lakes and poisoning the air with their dark magic. Shelob's offspring also infiltrate the home of wizard Radagast the Brown inside Mirkwood. When Radagast revives his pet hedgehog with dark magic, the spiders crawl back to Dol Guldur, the place of their breeding. During the events of desolation of Smaug, Thorin and the dwarves are attacked by the spiders deep within Mirkwood on their way to the Lonely Mountains. Bilbo too is kidnapped and cocooned in webs by the deadly spiders, but using the ring, he manages to escape, kill his captor with the elven sword sting, and free his dwarven friends. In the book, the spiders can talk, and Bilbo understands their language only when wearing the One Ring. Yazneg. This menacing orc was a ruthless hunter, a brutal sword fighter, and a fierce wolf warg rider, making him the perfect candidate for the second-in-command of Azog the Defiler. On Azog's orders, Yazneg tracks down Thorin and his dwarves to the Lone Lands and launches a brutal attack with the hopes of killing their leader and procuring the head of Thorin for Azog. But Yazneg was distracted in his first attempt by Radagast the Brown Wizard. When he attacks Thorin Oakenshield's camp again, Elrond and his elvish bodyguards intervene and begin slaughtering the orcs. Yazneg retreats to the orc camps to report the development to Azog, who gets frustrated with Yazneg's failure and throws him toward a pack of wargs who eat him alive. Fimbul. Along with Yazneg, the orc hunter Fimbul too served Azog the Defiler and Bolg as a lieutenant for their orc armies and aided the orc lords in the hunt for Thorin Oakenshield. When Yazneg fails to procure Thorin's head for their master Azog, Fimbul attempts to kill Thorin and Bilbo, but is driven away by the Great Eagle's intervention in the first Hobbit movie. Fimbul returns again in Desolation of Smaug and is seen leading an army of orcs in pursuit of the dwarves headed for Lonely Mountain. Fimbul spots a puddle of blood from Killy's wound. Tracking that, Fimbul arrives in Lake Town, where Thorin and his kindred are suspected to be resting. After attacking Bard the Bowman's house and escaping the clash, Fimbul delivers the report to Bolg that Thorin has left the town for the mountains. But Legolas spots Fimbul and decapitates him with a dagger, with his body drowning in the lake, but his severed head still growling at Legolas. The Master of Lake Town. Next, we have the Master of Esgaroth, a cunning, greedy, and corrupt official who hates Bard the Bowman, the captain of town archers, to the point that he arrests a nobleman like Bard under false charges. When Thorin and his dwarves arrive in Lake Town, the Master refuses them entry. When promised a share of the gold from the Lonely Mountains, the Master welcomes them with open arms and sends the dwarves on their way with fresh weapons. Later, when Smaug flies over Esgaroth and unleashes his fire breath upon the town, the Master leaves Esgaroth on a boat, overloading it with the wealth and riches that is accumulated over time. When the boat proves to be too slow because of the gold's weight, the Master doesn't hesitate to throw off his sidekick Alfrid Lickspittle into the water. The Master meets his end when Bard shoots Smaug dead, and the dragon falls into the lake, crushing his boat. Alfrid Lickspittle. To round off our list, we have the sneaky, cowardly cheat Alfrid Lickspittle, who's a corrupt official of Lake Town and is also the assistant of the Master. As a town councillor, Alfrid advises the Master on town matters, but his suggestions are guided by greed and treachery. Just like the Master, Alfrid too has a deep dislike for Bard the Bowman and sees him as a threat for his rebellious attitude. Alfrid creates a fabricated charge against Bard and arrests him to put him away once and for all. He's also distrustful of the dwarves initially, but when they promise gold, Alfrid happily welcomes them into Lake Town, but later he refuses to help Killy, who was hurting from his wound in the knee. Like we told you before, when Smaug attacks Lake Town, the Master and Alfrid try to flee on a boat with loads of gold. While Alfrid kicks a villager out of the boat, the Master too kicks out Alfrid to lighten the boat. He survives, but refuses to join the fight against the orcs by disguising himself as a woman. Instead, tries to flee with stolen gold again. Alfrid dies a strange death by inadvertently launching himself into the mouth of a troll. Marvelous verdict. When it comes to the Lord of the Rings trilogy or the Hobbit movies, the very many villains always make sure that the heroes of the story never have an easy way out, be it the Dark Lord Sauron and his innumerable sinister servants attempting to kill Frodo, or be it Azog the Defiler and his evil orcs hunting down Thorin. It's because of these dark forces that the storylines get so twisted, adventurous, and intriguing. So, which one of these malevolent entities of Middle-earth gets your vote for being the most terrifying? Don't forget to tell us in the comments section below. We'll come back with more Lord of the Rings franchise videos. Till then, watch your back and remember to keep Gandalf on your speed dial. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.